Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone. And now, here's your host and CEO of Rue Global Impact, Deborah Rue.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deborah Rue, and this is Human Potential at Work. I'm really excited about this conversation. My guest today is Kisiah Timmons, and she works with Verizon Media, which is part of the larger Verizon group, which includes a lot of different things. And I'm a big fan of the man that she works for as well, Larry Goldberg, and he has actually been on the show before. So I'm really looking forward to talking about why Verizon Media feels it's so important that we all have access. So really looking forward to this conversation. And I want to start the conversation, certainly, Kisiah, with you telling us a little bit more about who you are and how you navigated your life to being part of Verizon Media. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to finally connect with you.
Yes, I'm very impressed with the work that you're doing. So, Kisiah, tell us a little bit more about who you are and why you are part of the community of professionals with disabilities.
It's a very interesting story. I came into accessibility the hard way. I lost my vision 2 years after graduating with an electrical engineering degree. So I was already out working in industry, and then I had encountered sudden vision loss. And that's when my whole world changed. And I was in a situation where I ended up losing that job. I was working for a multinational consulting firm, doing some systems analyst work, still very technical. And they said that I couldn't do the job anymore. That was pretty crushing, but at the same time, as I went through vocational rehabilitation, learned about assistive technologies, the engineer in me kicked in. When you go through an undergraduate curriculum in engineering, they teach you how to solve problems. And I think for most people, I was uniquely qualified to take on the challenges of vision loss because of that. Assistive technologies are the great equalizer. Technology in general is a great equalizer, providing equal access to people with disabilities. Technology can truly be transformative, and it was so in my case. I joined AmeriCorps, proud to do. Joined AmeriCorps, went to work for a nonprofit that just eased back into working, the work environment. But my heart was pretty much always into, the private sector. I always wanted to go back to the private sector. And interestingly enough, I ended up being hired at another multinational consulting firm with more complex systems than the one that I was laid off from. But in this situation, this is the early 2000s, I vowed I'm not going to lose another job again due to my disability. I came into the interview, I had my laptop, I had my screen reader going, my assistive technologies, my braille display, going above and beyond to show competency and just displaying the expertise that I learned that, hey, I can take care of myself. Ideally, that's not the best situation. It's always the employer's responsibility to provide those accommodations and to provide that type of support. But I refused to lose another job. And so I became my own expert. I solved my own problems and found out the systems there were a lot more complex than they were at the other job, but I just kept my mouth shut. Like a lot of people with disabilities, I kept my mouth shut and I just resolved to solve my own problems. So because I was solving my own accessibility issues, I was invited to join a project at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And this is one of those things where I loved the corporate aspect of what I was doing, but there was this drive in me that I can help more people if I went into the accessibility world kind of full time, not just working for myself, but working to make, lives better for other people with disabilities. And so that was at the time where I really delved deeper into mobile computing devices. And this was the time where the iPhone had just come out. This is this brand new, innovative, transformative technology, and it wasn't accessible to people who were blind at the time. It wasn't. So found myself doing a lot of adaptive solutions for a lot of the veterans at the VA with vision loss. But ever since then, for the past 14, 15 years, mobile computing devices, that's driven my career. It's been my passion for the past 14, 15 years now, because it's given me a lot of independence on the go. And it's given a lot of other people with disabilities on the go as well.
And I think it's fascinating that first you lose your sight, and so you're dealing with that. And then, of course, you lose your job because obviously you're not going to add any value to society. Wrong. When actually you are the candidates that people are looking for. Verizon Media was smart enough to hire someone as talented as you, an African-American woman, an engineer, and a woman that has lived experiences with disabilities. Talk about amazing intersectionalities. But it's really sad to hear your story still, because we know this is happening every day to people. And I believe that people aren't disabled, society disables people. And I agree that technology is a great equalizer. And that's one reason why my company and I personally have been a customer of Verizon for, gosh, I was calculating it. I think it's been about 25 years. We use Verizon Wireless, for example, but we have been one of your customers for a long time. And I'm proud to be a customer of a corporate brand like Verizon that is smart enough to bring in talented women like you. So I just wanted to acknowledge that you already were dealing with so much. And it's a real shame that we do that to people, that we say, oh, even though you're a talented woman and you're an engineer, now because of this one thing, you're not good enough anymore. I think that's really ridiculous. And I think there's so much that we need to do to make sure that people can bring their entire self to work and really embrace their lived experiences. And I just am really glad that you navigated it to a point where you found an employer that values who you are as an individual. And I think we both, before we went on air, were loving on Larry Goldberg, who is such an amazing, talented leader, but he understands the value of the wisdom that you bring to the table. And why do you think it's so important to have a manager or a leadership team that really allows you to be who you are?
Because whenever you can be and bring your authentic self to work, you can perform. That's where you can perform your best work. If you can't be authentically, you tend to work harder. And that was in the case of one of my previous employers. I couldn't fess up, but at the same time, the fact that I was there and I was the only blind person that they've ever seen at the consulting firm there, I couldn't hide. I walked with a white cane. I couldn't hide it. There were other people that came to me with other disabilities, and they asked, how did you get this done? Can you help me? And from that experience, that's why I'm so vocal about my life story. I'm so vocal in the workplace, because I know that there are still people out there that are living in denial. They're scared. They're afraid of losing their jobs. And I know, like, maybe, that's my path, my role to play. I won't ever be able to change the world, but maybe I could change the world one person at a time.
I agree. And I have heard from another woman that we both know and love, Margot Jaffe. She also is a woman with lived experiences with disabilities. And she said the same thing about Larry Goldberg. She said, he believes in me. He's always looking for opportunities for me to grow and expand. He encourages me. And I wish I could hear this more from other leaders. And so yes, we want to just give so much love to Larry Goldberg. He's done so much for our community in a billion different ways, but I still think that a lot of people, as you're saying, do not believe that they can really be honest they can really be authentic about who they are, because if they are, they will be discriminated against. People will decide they're not good enough. And that still is so sad to me. And of course, Kisiah, you're dealing this from a couple of different lenses and intersections, because we are saying the same thing about women. Do women engineers really need to be? We're still saying this. And then on top of it, you're an African-American woman. And I was talking one time on a panel, and one of the panelists said, I'm just telling the corporations hire as many brown and black people as possible. And I agree. Yes, let's do this. But at the same time, let's look at the intersectionality. Where are the black women with lived experiences of disabilities that are engineers? That's who we want. We're the talented individuals. So I'm hoping that society's starting to say, wow, this is the employee that I would want because of her lived experiences. Think of the innovation. Think of how she's looking at these problems in a different way. She's looking at the creativity, and we know these things, but still I think a lot of employers don't really agree that this is happening. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind exploring that a little bit.
Yeah, it's about the unknown. It's, and that's the thing that with Verizon Media just was totally different. I didn't have to bring my laptop or show off my screen reader or my Braille display, because I was going to a team that was already very inclusive. Just to tell you a little bit of kind of the background to how I got to Verizon Media, what's so interesting was that when the door is slammed shut in your face over and over again, right? It's like, maybe I need to reinvent myself. So I went to Drexel University, and I've gotten my MBA. So I said, maybe people be a lot more willing to hire me, something in a less technical role, more focus on maybe the business of accessibility. Maybe that will get my foot into the door. But over the course of time, I did do some business development work in accessibility, but it's like the technical kept pulling me back at the core, still the engineering mindset. And so when I saw an open position at Verizon Media, it was actually to be a lab manager there. And because I figured, hey, that's something that's less technical, I'll probably be more fortunate in getting my foot in the door there. And I remember I was applying through LinkedIn, and they always pull up like who you're connected with. And it showed Larry. And I thought to myself, you know what? I really haven't met the guy. He's probably going to slam the door in my face like everyone else. So I never reached out to him. And then when I got the call for my phone interview, it was him. Amazing how the universe works. And we were talking and just discussing, and he said, I'm looking at your resume and I see mobile phones all over it. He said, we have this other position. It's more technical. You have some real technical chops here. Why don't you think about, can I send you the job description? And I said, no, I'm trying to be polite, but I figured if I kept the course and take on a more managerial level, less technical, that I would be more inclined, right, to get the job. And then I had the site visit and everything, and I met the members of the team. And before the day was over, I just thought to myself, I said, you know what? No, this is the place that I can take that technical role. Yeah, I can do that. And I ended up writing a nice letter, because I wrote Larry and I sent them like a thank you letter. And I said, you know what? I'm withdrawing my application. I want the mobile app position. I want the principal product designer position. And yeah, then I ended up getting it. But it was one of those things that it's just twofold. And I talk to a lot of young women. I love to mentor young women. And one of the things that I always tell them is that don't be afraid to reach out and make that connection. Don't. They either tell you yes or no, but at least you tried. The failure is when you don't try. And number two, don't sell yourself short. As women, we have to get out of that. We have to get out of that. And this is outside of race. This is outside of disability. We often sell ourselves short and not really going for the jugular and going for what we really want. And that's how I felt. And so from that experience, it's a very lived experience, but if anyone could take anything out of my career journey, it's those two things. Don't sell yourself short. The worst anyone can ever tell you is no. And you're going to get no a lot, but it's about perseverance and tenacity. If you
Well
keep
said.
down the path, you are worth it. You go for it all the time.
And I want to ask one more question in regards to this, and then I want to move on to some of the other questions. But what I just want to let the audience know, and I know my audience understands this, but what she's experienced at Verizon Media, unfortunately, the welcoming, the encouraging, we're not going to just put you here. Wait a minute, you're even more qualified than we thought. Let's put you over here, really wanting you to win because that's a win for the corporate brand. Unfortunately, that is rare. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of companies that I see this happening in. And even in companies that it's happening in, sometimes it's happening in just certain areas, but not throughout the organization. So I think we all agree there's a lot of work to do. I also have found something, speaking of mentoring, one thing that I've started seeing a lot of, and it's troubling me, is that there are a lot of very talented men and women with lived experience with disabilities working for large corporate brands that they get hired in. They're so hopeful, and then they're pretty much left right where they are, and they're never seen from again. There's legends and so I just wanted to also have you just talk a little bit about that, because it's a huge issue and something that we do need to keep uncovering, these dirty little secrets that are happening. Like these very talented corporations that did not understand the value, the innovation, the creativeness they were going to get from you being such a talented woman that you are. So I was just wondering if you would address that a little bit.
Yes, and I think it's twofold. Like I said, I think a lot of women, we go along to get along. We get to a certain level. We go along to get along. We're just trying to rise through the ranks of corporate America. But the one thing that I've done consistently throughout the course of my life, beginning in high school, was seeking out mentors. Seeking those connections within the organizations that you work for, that you just click with that person, someone who's been there a lot longer than you, someone that you feel comfortable with saying, hey, this is where I'm going with my life, and can you help me? That's another thing that we don't do too much. The other thing is, and this is just from experience, and this is just negative. Sometimes amongst women, we put each other down. We're not in there to help others. And I think that's a sad situation too, that we get caught up in those two dynamics. Number one, we're thinking about how can I outdo this other person? And number two, we don't really look out for those people that may come around once in a decade to seek out the knowledge from. I have the attitude I can always be better. Am I a perfectionist? I don't like to think of myself as a perfectionist, but if I don't continue to grow, if I'm not continually being challenged, then I'm going to get bored. There's always something else out there for me to do. And I look to people to help guide me, increasing my skill set, showing me something different that maybe I didn't know about myself. And that's something that amongst women, we don't do. We don't. We just get in and we're happy to be there.
Yep, we're nice women. And also, I have to agree with you. I hate when women are mean to each other, because that is not the way forward. And I also want to comment on, as you were talking about how important it is to get the right mentors. It's also so important to make sure that we're focused on representation matters. We need more women that are darker colored skin, that are engineers, that have lived experiences with disabilities being the mentors. We need to do a better job with that. And we're working on it. But that's something that I think, once again, I appreciate Verizon Media for understanding the value and the leadership that you bring to the table. And let's talk about Verizon Media. A lot of people know about Verizon Wireless, but I think a lot of people don't know what Verizon Media is. So tell us more about Verizon Media.
Yes. So Verizon Media, we're the media and entertainment company of Verizon. We're the tech company based in Silicon Valley. And most people know us for our brands like Yahoo, AOL, and TechCrunch. That's the core of who we are. We connect users with their passion for sports, lifestyle, entertainment, news. It's one of the companies within the Verizon that's constantly innovating, which is one of the reasons that I love it, because there's always different projects. As the principal product designer on the accessibility team, my job is to work with all product teams globally to make sure that all of their products and platforms are accessible to people with disabilities, especially those that use assistive technologies. So it's a fun, dynamic place to work. We have great products, we have apps, and it's not just the basics. Of course, we're known for Yahoo Mail, AOL Mail, and those things, but we have some really great fun products like sports and fantasy sports that our users love.
And is accessibility just for people with disabilities?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear.
I'm lopping you a ball in that. Is accessibility just for people with disabilities, or
No? Definitely not. From what I've seen, another target market that we look for as well. We often get feedback from seniors, active aging seniors. A lot of them, they do not consider themselves as having a disability. However, due to normal changes within vision over the course of your life, assistive features like color contrast, larger font sizes, that's very valuable to them. So they don't necessarily, a lot of active seniors, they don't consider themselves as, quote, having a disability, but they also benefit from those assistive technologies. Also, with that being said, accessibility is also access to, especially for those that are in developing countries. I mentioned the work that I do is actually global. I work with product teams from Taiwan to the UK to the US, but we have brands, we have products that they support all types of devices. And of course, you have your iPhone, you have different Android devices, but there are also older model devices that say people in developing countries they're using, and we also support that as well. So accessibility is a large tent. As people with disabilities, of course, is those that have disabilities that do or do not use assistive technologies. It is also seniors, as well as access to technology to underserved communities, for example, in the developing countries as well.
I agree. And I also believe that accessibility benefits all of us, because when you make sure that accessibility is built into those products, it benefits all of us. And when we really saw it happen was when COVID-19 forced us all to go home, shelter in place. That's when everybody started understanding what we're talking about with accessibility when that happened, because people were shocked to realize that they were having access problems all over the place. And so I think a lot of people have woken up to the fact of why accessibility actually benefits everyone. And I love the example you gave about the seniors. I'm one of those seniors myself. And it's interesting aging and watching my eyesight become less and less robust, and my hearing, and accessibility is for human beings. And it's a way that technology, once again, as you said, is a great equalizer. And speaking of technology, tell me more about being a woman, an African-American woman, and a woman with lived experiences with disability, and being in the tech field, because we still are not really being as welcomed into the tech field as we should be.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things, and just speaking honestly, Silicon Valley from the outside looking in, it was just so glamorous. It was one of those things where especially if you have a computer science, if you have a developer background, you engineer, Silicon Valley, that's the place you want to be. But it was surprising for me to see that I living out in, say, Sunnyvale, or I could go weeks without seeing anyone like me. It was very startling. We're not well represented, right? But it was one of those things, is that even though I was there, especially having a disability, there were a lot of things about my lived experiences. But being there being with a Silicon Valley based company is also very empowering. because I know that there's nothing that I've gone through, no heartache that I've gone through with my career and just my vision loss. None of that is in vain, because I know that there are other women and other women of color who benefit from my presence there. For example, it shocks me sometimes when people reach out to me online and they say, I've never seen anyone like you. I look at that and it still shocks me. It shocks me, the representation of women in engineering. Like, that totally shocks me. I was in the 6th grade and this beautiful science fair judge, she walked up to me and she said, that's what you should be, because there are not a lot of women in engineering. And I was 12 years old. So I'm in my 40s now. So 30 years later, it's still shocking to me that the numbers have not changed.
I know.
And so that's one of the reasons why I'm very big in mentoring. I'm actually just joined Tech Women, which is a program right now mentoring a young lady from Sierra Leone that's interested in STEM. And it's one of those great programs that bridges the gap between those in developing nations in Silicon Valley, helps give them guidance in their career in STEM. I'm also very vocal on LinkedIn. People reach out to me, I reach back. And I love doing that because of the fact that's the way it happens. If I can break down barriers for anyone else, I'm willing to do that. Then everything that I've gone through that may have caused me pain, it's worth it if I can help other people. And yeah, it's a lot to be said about it. Being an African American woman in Silicon Valley, having an engineering degree, it was incredible. But that's what makes my team so special. Because believe me, it took a few months, a few quarters for it to really sink in that this is not like any other place. When I first came in, I wanted to be Superwoman like I was every place else. I can't speak up. I can't say I don't have time to do this. I have to do everything because that's the way I've always done it. And then I'll never forget, and this was a couple of years ago, where it's, what is going on with you? You're right? What is really going on with you? And I had management, and my managers have always said, you know what? You don't have to do that here. This is not like any other place. We're not like any others that you've met. So in that way, I've grown tremendously to realize that you don't make assumptions about people. You don't make assumptions. At some point, you have to trust and you have to keep plowing through and leave some of that baggage behind. And once I did that, I became a lot more comfortable in my skin, being at a Silicon Valley-based tech company.
Yeah, and it's hard when you have to be everybody's hero. It's hard. And it is sad to say, I know a young woman, everybody's younger than me these days, but that's okay too. I believe she's in her middle 30s, and she's an African-American woman that had parents with disabilities, but doesn't have lived experience with disabilities herself. But she was told when she entered school to become an engineer, she had her professor ask her who told her she could be an engineer. Who told her? Who told this young woman of African-American descent who told you could be an engineer? And I was so shocked when she told me this. Now, what she did was she just didn't listen, and she still became an engineer, and she's now working for a gigantic Silicon Valley corporation. But that made my heart hurt. My heart hurts a lot when I hear comments like that. Who told you could be an engineer? What do you think you're doing? So I agree that a team like Verizon Media, it sounds like heaven, and what you're learning from each other and what you're teaching the world. But what do we do to take what you've created at Verizon Media that is obviously so different and pull it into the rest? Get others to follow your lead. What are y'all doing that others can learn from?
Oh, yeah. And so this is the other thing that is so different about Verizon Media. It's like I mentioned my role in mentoring others, and they love like volunteerism. Like, I've never worked for any place, any organization that is just, they think we have a philosophy that we're supposed to give back. And so they embrace volunteerism. On the accessibility front, what makes us very different is that we have accessibility labs. Like right now, our campuses are not open during the pandemic, But this was the first place where I've ever seen accessibility labs that are created for people to come in and learn about accessibility. That's where I work with developers and engineers. I teach product managers the basics of assistive technology and how to make their products accessible to people with disabilities. And we also open up our labs to other organizations, to other companies, so that they may learn how to better, facilitate learning and fill in knowledge gaps on accessibility within their own organization. Another thing that we do oftentimes, it's nonprofit organizations that will come through. And after being off campus for more than a year, the thing that I miss the most about the Accessibility Lab are the visits from outsiders, the visits from school-age children, the visits from college kids. I've always known that I was an extrovert, but having to live life through a pandemic, you look back on those things to see what really drives you and what motivates you. And that's the one thing that I absolutely miss about being an Accessibility Lab, is that personal engagement, engaging with other builders, people that work for Verizon Media, as well as the outside world. I definitely miss that engagement. So those are the things that Verizon Media is just head and shoulders above most companies, because we have dedicated safe spaces for people to come in and learn about accessibility, but we don't keep that expertise to ourselves. We open up our labs so that other organizations as well as young people can come in and learn about the things that we do.
That's amazing. It makes me very proud to be one of your customers, because I want to do business with corporations that are making a difference. And I believe a lot of us want to do that now. And that's one reason why I do this show. I want to show who is actually walking the walk and talking the talk, which Verizon Media is, with very talented people like you. I know that I kept you longer than I promised just because I knew that it was going to be amazing to speak to you. And I'm hoping you will come back on again. But tell the audience how they can learn more about Verizon Media, but also how they can connect with you. You mentioned LinkedIn, and I know you're on this other social media, but tell the audience more about those two things.
Yes, to learn more about the work that I do within accessibility and at Verizon Media, log on and visit verizonmedia.com/accessibility. You can watch some videos about our users and what they think about our products, as well as learn more about the Accessibility Labs, which is at the heart of what we do. If you want to connect with me, the best way is through LinkedIn. My handle there is Kisiah, Kisiah Timmons. Timmons MBA. So if you type in that handle, you'll pull up my profile. Thanks, Deborah, for having me. I've always wanted to connect with you on more of a personal basis, so this is so great. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be on your show.
And we're working on something that I'm totally going to bring you into, so I'll send you an email about it. But I also want to say, y'all have gotten to listen and watch Kisiah. I would heavily recommend her as a speaker. If you're having a panel about technology, here is an amazing woman that provides so much depth of knowledge to these conversations. So let's make sure we're inviting her to panels all over the world. She's a global expert. So let's take time to make sure, once again, that we are supporting the work she's doing to support so many others. And thank you to Larry Goldberg for his amazing leadership, the Margos of the world, and also to you, Kisiah, because this is how we change the world. This is how we do it, one voice at a time, and by making sure that we're turning up the volume for other important voices. So, Kisiah, thank you so very much for your work and for being on the show. And I look forward to continuing to change the world with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work, brought to you by Rue Global Impact. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your audio. To learn more about Rue Global Impact and the services we provide, visit rueglobal.com. To learn more about how you can become a sponsor of Human Potential at Work, email David at rueglobal.com. That's David at rueglobal.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back next time with a new episode.